The airplane cabin buzzed with the low murmur of boarding, a blend of rolling luggage, overhead bins snapping shut, and voices negotiating space. Sunlight streamed through the windows, catching on polished armrests and the navy blue fabric of the seats. In row 14, aisle seat C, sat Renee Walker, her posture straight, her handbag resting neatly on her lap. She had chosen this seat deliberately months ago when she booked the flight herself. Renee liked aisle seats. She liked the freedom to stand when she wanted, the sense of control it gave her in tight spaces. She had earned that preference through years of travel for work, through red-eye flights and rushed connections. Today's trip was personal, not business, but habit stayed with her. As the final passengers boarded, a uniformed pilot stepped into the aisle near her row. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his gray hair perfectly combed, his captain's stripes catching the light. He glanced down at Renee, then at the seat number above her. "Ma'am," he said, voice carrying authority without effort. "That seat is usually reserved." Renee looked up, calm. "Reserved for whom?" The pilot smiled thinly. "For passengers who need quick access or who understand the cabin flow better." Renee blinked once. "I selected this seat when I booked." He chuckled a short sound. "I'm sure you did. But window seats tend to be more comfortable for most people." She felt the shift immediately, the subtle tightening in the air. A few nearby passengers glanced over, pretending not to listen. "I'm comfortable here," Renee replied evenly. The pilot folded his arms. "You might find it easier to move. We don't want delays." "I'm not causing one," she said. His smile vanished. "Ma'am, I've been flying longer than you've probably been traveling. Trust me." Renee's jaw tightened. "With respect, Captain, this is my seat." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Let's not make this difficult." Across the aisle, a young woman watched, eyes wide. A man a row back frowned, but said nothing. Renee felt that familiar sensation, the one that came when a choice was questioned not because it was wrong, but because it was hers. "I'm staying," Renee said quietly. The pilot straightened, irritation flashing across his face. "Fine," he snapped. "But don't complain later." He turned sharply and walked away, his shoulders rigid. Renee exhaled slowly. Her hands trembled just slightly. She hated that part most, the way her body reacted even when her mind stayed firm. The plane pushed back from the gate. Safety announcements played. The cabin settled. Minutes later, the pilot returned, this time standing directly in front of her row. His voice was louder now, drawing attention. "Ma'am," he said, "I need to confirm you understand the seating guidelines." Renee looked up. "What guidelines?" "Aisle seats are often reassigned," he said, "especially when they're better suited for others." "For whom?" she asked again. He hesitated, then scoffed. "Experienced travelers." The word landed heavy. Renee felt heat rise in her chest. "I am an experienced traveler." The pilot laughed, sharp and dismissive. "Sure." A murmur spread. Someone shifted uncomfortably. A flight attendant hovered nearby, unsure. Renee reached into her bag, fingers brushing her phone. She didn't pull it out. "Not yet. I paid for this seat," she said, her voice steady. "And I will keep it." The pilot leaned in again. "You're being unreasonable." "No," Renee replied. "I'm being clear." For a moment, he stared at her, as if trying to decide how far he could push. Then he shook his head in disbelief. "Unbelievable," he muttered, loud enough for others to hear. He turned and walked toward the cockpit, shaking his head. The flight attendant approached, eyes apologetic. "Ma'am," she whispered, "I'm sorry about that." Renee nodded, swallowing hard. "Thank you." As the plane climbed, Renee stared out the window across the aisle, her reflection faintly visible in the glass. She thought about all the times she had adjusted herself to make others comfortable, all the times she had moved, softened, exclaimed, "Not today." 20 minutes into the flight, the captain's voice came over the intercom, calm and controlled. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be cruising at 35,000 feet. Sit back and enjoy the flight." Renee closed her eyes briefly. Then, unexpectedly, footsteps approached again. The same pilot stood there, but something about him was different now, tighter, less sure. "Ma'am," he said, quieter, "may I speak with you?" Renee opened her eyes. "You're already doing so." He glanced around, then lowered his voice. I've been informed there was a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding, she repeated. Yes, he said stiffly. Your seat assignment is valid. She said nothing. He cleared his throat. I apologize for the inconvenience. The word inconvenience felt small. Renee met his eyes. You belittled me. His jaw clenched. That was not my intention. But it was your action, she replied. Passengers watched openly now. The young woman across the aisle leaned forward, listening. The pilot inhaled. I should not have questioned your choice. No, Renee agreed. You shouldn't have. Silence stretched. I apologize, he said again, more firmly this time. Renee nodded once. Thank you. He stepped back, posture stiff, then turned and walked away. The cabin exhaled. A man behind Renee leaned forward. You handled that well, he whispered. She smiled faintly. I was tired of handling it quietly. The rest of the flight passed without incident. Drinks were served, laptops opened, conversations resumed. But something lingered, a subtle awareness that hadn't been there before. When the plane began its descent, the pilot's voice returned, steady once more. Renee listened without emotion. After landing, passengers stood and gathered their belongings. As Renee reached for her bag, the flight attendant touched her arm gently. I'm glad you stayed, she said softly. So am I, Renee replied. At the door, the pilot stood again, greeting passengers. When Renee approached, he paused. Have a good day, he said, neutral. She met his gaze. I will. Walking through the jet bridge, Renee felt lighter, though she knew the weight would return someday, in another place, another moment. But this time, she had not moved. Outside the gate, sunlight flooded the terminal. Renee adjusted her bag on her shoulder and walked forward, her step steady. She didn't know who had reported the incident, or what conversation had happened behind the cockpit door. She only knew the outcome mattered, because sometimes staying seated was the bravest thing you could do. And sometimes the ground shifted because you refused to move. Renee disappeared into the crowd, carrying her choice with her, unchanged, undeniable, and entirely her own. Renee moved through the terminal with the steady rhythm of someone who had learned to keep walking even when her thoughts lagged behind. The incident replayed in fragments now, no longer sharp but persistent. Like turbulence you feel long after the seatbelt sign goes off. She wondered which moment would stay with her the longest. The pilot's laugh, the silence of the passengers, or the way her own voice had stayed calm while something inside her burned. At baggage claim, she stood slightly apart from the crowd, watching suitcases slide past. A woman approached hesitantly, the same one who had been sitting across the aisle. I just wanted to say, the woman began, adjusting the strap of her purse. I saw what happened, and I'm sorry I didn't say anything. Renee studied her face. There was sincerity there, mixed with embarrassment. Thank you for telling me, she said. That matters. The woman nodded, relieved, and stepped away. Renee lifted her suitcase when it appeared, the weight grounding her. Outside, the air was warmer, heavy with jet fuel and late afternoon sun. She paused before calling a rideshare, letting the moment settle fully. She thought about how often all seats became battlegrounds of control. How often choice itself made people uncomfortable when it wasn't theirs to grant. She had learned early that confidence was sometimes mistaken for defiance, especially when it came from her. On the ride to her hotel, she replayed the apology. It had come quickly, too quickly, as if someone else had intervened. She suspected a complaint had been filed, maybe by a flight attendant, maybe by a passenger who had finally decided silence wasn't neutral. She would never know. But she knew this. The apology wasn't the point. The point was that she hadn't moved. That evening, Renee sat by the window of her hotel room, city lights flickering on below. She kicked off her shoes and stretched her legs, letting the day loosen its grip. Her phone buzzed with a message from her sister. Did everything go okay? Renee typed back slowly. Landed. Long story. Call me when you're free, her sister replied. Later, with the phone pressed to her ear, Renee told the story aloud for the first time. Hearing it in her own voice made it feel real in a different way. He talked to you like that? Her sister asked, incredulous. Yes, Renee said, and I almost moved. That's the part that scares me. But you didn't, her sister said firmly. No, Renee agreed. I didn't. The next morning, Renee attended the family event she had flown in for, surrounded by relatives, laughter filling the room. Yet even there, pieces of the flight surfaced in her mind. The way authority had been assumed, the way it had cracked. An older cousin pulled her aside. "I heard you had some drama on your flight," she said. Renee smiled faintly. "Something like that." Her cousin shook her head. "I'm proud of you." Those words landed deeper than the pilot's apology ever could. Days later, the airline sent an email. Carefully worded, polite, vague. It mentioned feedback and commitment to passenger experience. Renee read it once, then archived it. She didn't need validation packaged in corporate language. What stayed with her instead were the faces. The young woman watching. The man who had leaned forward afterward. The flight attendant who had apologized without being asked. She wondered how many small shifts had happened because she stayed seated. How many people would notice something next time. On her return flight, Renee chose another aisle seat. The cabin looked the same. Different crew. Same routine. When she sat down, no one questioned her. No one commented. It was uneventful in the best way. As the plane climbed, she smiled to herself. She knew the world wouldn't change all at once. She knew another pilot, another seat, another moment would come. But she also knew this. Each time she stayed, it became easier to stay again. When turbulence hit midway through the flight, Renee braced herself, hands resting calmly on the armrests. Around her, passengers tensed, gripping whatever they could. The pilot's voice came over the intercom, reassuring, controlled. Renee listened without resentment now. Authority didn't threaten her when she trusted her own. The plane smoothed out. The cabin relaxed. As they descended, Renee glanced down the aisle, watching light shift across faces, all of them carrying stories no one else could see. She wondered how many silent decisions were being made in those seats, how many quiet lines were being drawn. After landing, she waited her turn to stand, unhurried. When she stepped into the aisle, she felt no need to rush, no need to shrink. At the door, a different pilot stood, smiling professionally. "Thank you for flying with us," he said. Renee met his eyes. "You're welcome." Walking through the terminal again, she felt the same sunlight, the same movement, but something inside her was steadier now, not hardened, clarified. She understood that dignity didn't announce itself. It didn't demand space loudly. Sometimes it simply refused to give space up, and that refusal, quiet and firm, could change the ground beneath everyone watching. Renee blended into the flow of travelers, just another passenger on the move. But she carried something invisible with her now, something earned, a seat chosen, a line held, a moment where she stayed.